Okay everyone, today we're just going to go over how to work with Illustrator. Adobe Illustrator should be in the dock. It's the AI icon, but if it's not there, you will be able to find it in the Macintosh hard drive under the Applications folder under Adobe Illustrator right here. So go ahead and start by launching Adobe Illustrator. You will need to sign in the first time. Hopefully you've already signed in and created your account. We'll let it go ahead and open up and allow it to use what it needs to use. So as you can see, you only have to do this once on the computer in the lab. For me it's the company school account, but I think for you it'll be the other one. And then once you're signed in after secondary authentication, takes a little bit of time to get signed in. You get approved, and hopefully this will be the last time you need to sign in this area. I'm going to go ahead and close all this and just create a new document. You'll notice that you have some choices up here. You'll have web, print. If you go to print, you'll see that everything is in points. We're going to be working with inches for now, so we're going to switch it to inches. And I'm going to make an 8.5 by 11 document. You can change it to whatever size you want for your artboard. And you notice that the orientation is vertical, which is what we want. 300 dots per inch, or pixels per inch, is where we are. And we're in a color mode CMYK. We'll be going over these later. I'm going to hit create. I'm going to turn this off, and you'll see right away that we have what looks like a sheet of paper. And this entire area is all laid out in different ways. You'll see a toolbar on the left. You'll see a bunch of information on the top part of the screen, and on the right you'll see the properties palette, which takes up the entire space. We're currently in a workspace called Essentials. You can kind of see that right here. We can change that window workspace to something different, like for instance Workspace. I'm going to go to Layout and change my layout. So notice now that things have changed. Instead of the properties palette here, we have the transform and align palette. We have swatches, color, color guide. These palettes are available to be changed and moved around, and we're going to do that right now. Also notice that the artboard in the middle is on the gray background. One of the first keyboard shortcuts I really want you to learn is Command minus to zoom out. Command minus minus minus, and the Command plus 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 key to zoom in. You can see you can zoom in quite a bit. Command minus minus minus, Command plus plus, and you'll see in the upper left hand corner of this area, this window, you'll see the amount of size, zoom size that you have. So you can see you can zoom out quite a bit. And in fact, if you zoom all the way to 3.13%, you'll actually see your entire document. And so you can kind of see that you can have lots of sheets of paper littered all over this area. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be working with several artboards during the semester, so that you'll be able to create several different pages for design, and without having to actually save one after the other. Anyway, another shortcut beside Command minus and Command plus is just Command 0, and that zooms you in to the artboard that you're actually working on, and you can see the entire thing. Okay, so we've changed the workspace layout here under workspace to layout, so you should have everything that I see here. But let's actually set it up a little bit differently than what we have here. What I'd like you to do under Windows is notice that we had a properties palette, but we don't have one anymore. But by going under Windows Properties, you'll see that we actually get the properties palette back. And I'm going to select this little tab here, and I'm going to dock it back up here into this window. So I've got my transform, my align, and now I've got my properties located right up here. In fact, it should be opening. Now, artboard, layers, libraries. The libraries I don't use much, but the layers we're going to be using are strokes and gradients. We're not going to be using the gradients as much, so we can actually take the gradients out and exit, say goodbye. Strokes we're going to use quite a bit, so I'm going to dock it here. And you can kind of see that I've docked things into different ways based on how I use them. So I use the layers here. We have our pull-out panels. You can see you can even physically move some of these things. We have our pull-up panel, so our paragraph panel here. So you can always click on this character panel and it'll pop out, and then clicking pops it back in. And hopefully and you can see our properties panel now is taking up a lot of space, but we still have access to the other stuff. Okay, the toolbar on the left, by default, you're usually under the selection tool. It's the top tool on the toolbar. And you'll notice that some of these tools, like the rectangle tool, have a little caret at the bottom right corner. And what that means is if you hold down that tool, you'll get actually access to other tools that are kind of hidden inside of that tool. Every time you change your window layout, you'll get a different setup. So if you're used to like the eyedropper tool being in the tool palette, like right here, and you change the window workspace to something else like tracing or typography, you might find that this actually starts to hide in a different location. So be aware that when you change your window workspace, you'll be changing things as well on the tools area. Okay, if you like the way that this is set up, you can always take your Windows workspace and actually create this as a new workspace. So for me, I might want to call it 4.1, and boom. And at this point, if anything ever gets changed or moved around, you can always go to Workspace and select Reset 4.1, and you'll see it pops everything back to the way it was. So if you like a workspace, you like working in a certain way, you can create a workspace that works for you. Okay, so Command plus, Command minus, Command 0 to zoom out completely and see everything. Another thing that sometimes it's nice to have is the ruler. So Command R will turn the ruler on. And the nice part about having a ruler is when you pull from a ruler, you can actually create these guides. Now these guides, I'm going to go back to my selection tool here, letter V. These guides are selectable in Illustrator. If this was Photoshop, you wouldn't have the ability to select them, but the guides are selectable. So you can see I've selected these two guides. I'm going to hit delete and then delete those guides as well. And you'll notice that every time I select something, a different thing, it's going to change my property panel. So every tool, every different thing has different properties, and the properties will change accordingly. Let's see, what's the next thing? Let's add a shape to our page. So I'm going to zoom out so I can see the entire 8.5 by 11. I'm going to start with just a rectangle. I'm going to select the rectangle tool. You see the letter M, that's the shortcut key for rectangle. And I'm going to just make a rectangle. And you notice that I'm just clicking and dragging upper top to lower bottom. And you'll notice that as I do that, I have the mouse key held down, that you can see the width and the height in inches, because that's how we set up our document. And boom, now I have, and you can see it here, a 1.0278 inch by 1.6 inch rectangle. Now if I wanted to turn this into a square, I could actually go back. I'm going to zoom in a couple times so I can see Command plus plus plus, and I can actually grab that anchor point and try to get it to be a perfect 1 by 1 inch square. Now that's a lot of work, and one easy way to do it is just to select it, go to the properties panel and just type 1, tab 1, and you'll see that now I have a perfect 1 inch square. So if you're using this for laser cutting or cutting out stuff, you can get these to be exactly the right size. You'll notice that if I select the selection tool and I click away, the rectangle or the square disappears. I'm going to select it. It's still there, and the reason it disappeared is because it doesn't have a stroke and it doesn't have a fill on the inside, because it's a mathematical equation at this point. So in order to give it like some life, I'm going to actually go to the properties panel, and you'll see there's a fill and a stroke. So if I click on the fill, the red line across the white background means transparent. So I'm just going to pick an arbitrary color like red, and now you'll see that the actual square is filled in red. So when I click away, it doesn't disappear. If I select it again, I can actually give it a stroke and give that stroke a different color. So in this case, it's black. And if I click away, you'll see that it is in fact black. And by the way, the nice part about working with Illustrator and with objects in Illustrator is they're all mathematically based. So you can zoom in as much as you want. I'm going to hold the Command spacebar key. And when I do that, it allows me to click and hold with my mouse so I can zoom in really, really tightly onto a specific area that I want. And you can see that the more you zoom, everything stays nice and sharp. And by the way, this black outside stroke is not a real thing. The real thing is the mathematical blue line that you see that has no width whatsoever, but it actually is there. So for instance, if you click on this blue line and go to the strokes, you can see you can make this stroke even smaller. So you see the stroke can be as small as nothing, and when it's nothing, it's got the line with the white background. And that means that there is no stroke, and it's just a pure mathematical 1-inch line. Because if you add a couple of points of stroke, you see, what's going to happen is I'm going to command 0 to zoom out, that's going to be slightly bigger than an inch, right? Because you've got the stroke. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Now, we've been using the selection tool to just select, and you'll notice that I'm going to hit command +++ a couple times to zoom in. You'll notice that we get a couple of handles here. We've got our corner handles, and that allows us to modify the object after the fact, and you'll notice that we can actually deform it. If I wanted to make the square smaller without deforming it, I would hold the Shift key down. You can see that works like this, right? The next thing you'll notice is that the handles also are available on the edges, so you can actually pull these and scooch these in and out. And you'll notice that the properties transform area updates accordingly when you make these choices. So I'm going to put it back to 1 by 1. Easily done. Also notice that you get these little handles that are available on the corners, and that is to round the corners. So you'll see if I grab one, it'll round all 4 of the corners. I'm going to undo that, command Z, or edit, undo. If you wanted to round just one corner, you click once and then click again, and that'll allow you to round just one corner of these kinds of things. Okay, I'm going to like that shape. I'm going to hold the space bar so I can move this entire panel to the left. That's called panning. The pan tool is available here as well, but most people just use the space bar. Hold down the space bar, and when you have the selection tool with the space bar, that allows you to pan. Now I'm going to select this using the selection tool. I'm going to hold the Option key down, and notice when I hold the Option key, it changes its cursor. And holding the Option key and dragging will make a duplicate of the thing that I had. So this is the way most people make a duplicate object in Illustrator, is to just hold to Option drag it to create a duplicate. This works in Photoshop as well. With layers, it works with almost everything. Now I'm going to go back here and I'm going to pull this. I'm going to select twice. Let's see, select. I'm going to pull this back out so that we have a square again. Remember, I was able to click once, twice to pull it in, and then click once, twice, and I could pull it back out. So I have a square again. What I'd like to do is rotate the square 45 degrees, and you'll notice that if you put your mouse on the outer corner of an object, it'll change shape. So this is like changing its size, but this changes it by rotating it. And so if you click now, you'll see you can rotate it, and you can rotate it exactly what you need it to be. Now normally, if I want to rotate it 45, I'll just rotate it 45. Now if you want to get there quickly without being inaccurate, holding the Shift key down allows you to just snap it to 45 quickly. And you'll let go, and you'll notice right here that it updated as well in the properties. So if you wanted to rotate it to 60, you could rotate it 60. So there's ways of doing that here as well. So we'll just put it back at 45. So those are a couple of things. I'm going to zoom out completely, command 0. And we're going to go to our next shape, which will be an ellipse. Now the ellipse tool allows us, very much like the rectangle tool, to draw a shape that looks like oval, right? I'm going to zoom in here, command +++, and we can do everything we want as long as we're using the selection tool. And even when we're not, you can rotate that, you can resize it, right? And you have access to width, height, and the everything here. So if I wanted to make it a perfect circle that's 1 inch, I'd go 1, 1, and then 0 degrees, because it really doesn't matter. And there's a perfect circle. Wait. Somehow it got changed to 0, 1, 1, and 0. And that we've got now a perfect 1-inch circle that you can kind of see fits in perfectly into our square. If I want to change the color of that, I can just go to the fill, and as long as it's selected, it will change colors. Another location, by the way, beside the properties panels, because sometimes you have the align panel up or a transform panel or something else open, and you still want to be able to change the color of an object. I'm going to option drag this so you can kind of see. Is to select the object, and then down here you'll notice that it says the outline is black and the fill color is yellow, and just by double clicking that brings up our color picker. And so you can then change the object. You'll see this is the previous color and this is the current color. By hitting OK, it now changes it to what you need it to be. If you want to change the stroke and, like, for instance, get rid of the stroke completely, you can use the transparent, or you can double click the stroke and set the transparency. Well, I guess you can't set the transparency here, so you can only set it using this little transparency thing. So now that's how we've worked it. Okay, hopefully this helps a little bit. Now, what can you do with these things? Well, let's go ahead and just create a new shape. Let's make it a perfect circle. So holding the Shift key down allows to constrain our proportions. And we're going to make this a 1 by 1 inch circle. So properties panel is very useful for that. We're going to change the fill color to something like purple, magenta, and then we're going to duplicate it 3 times. Okay, so we're going to click away, click once, and I'm going to hold the option key down and drag once and then once. And you notice that you get a bunch of, like, nice information about, like, how these things are relatively, like, spaced. If you were to move one, it's looking for the other objects and it's trying to figure out, like, what it can align to, right? So if you've got this, it's going to try to align to this, it's going to try to align up and down. But if for whatever reason things are out of alignment and you want to make sure that these are all distributed and aligned correctly, what you can do is select all of them using, just a regular selection tool, and go to your Align panel, and you'll notice you've got a bunch of different choices. And if you want to align them all by center, you just click this little button, and now you see that they're all aligned through the center. There's also a distribute objects, and that allows you to distribute these evenly. So for instance, if you wanted to distribute them evenly on a horizontal basis, you just do that. And now you can see they're all perfectly situated as they're situated in a line, equally distributed. Now, if you wanted to move one of these and move all at the same time, what you would want to do is select all of them and do something called grouping them. So you would go to Object, and then you select Group. Command G is another way to do it, right? And now when you select one, that object is grouped. Now, how does that look in Illustrator, you might be wondering. I'm going to go down to my Layers palette here, and I'm going to open it up, and you'll notice that if I open up Layer 1, everything that is on this page happened to end up in our Layers group. And now you'll see that I have my rectangle. This is the first one I made. The one rotated 45 degrees, the ellipse, the blue ellipse, and then I've got this group. Because I created a group, it actually now is an object in our layers. And then in order to access something in a group, well, you can go to the layers and then you can select it. You can see I can turn that specific one off and on. But the way that most of the time that you're going to access one object in a group, so say for instance I want to make this middle one a little darker, is by double clicking into the group. And you'll notice up here when you do that, 1, 2, that you get the layer itself, and then you're in now the subgroup. So you're physically in this group within that layer. And you see everything else is grayed out. You can't touch anything else. You can only work with the objects in this group. And so you can select this one, go to your fill tool and maybe make it a little bit darker. And now you've made it a little bit darker. Now, the problem is a lot of times you forget that you have to get out of this isolation mode or this subgroup. And the way you could do that is you can double click anywhere away from that group, and that puts you outside of that group. Or you can click here on the layer 1, and that'll put you in the layer 1, right? You're still not out of isolation mode until you go here. And so once you've done that, you can move that group around as needed.